Hello, my friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is David, and today we have some discussion. The book isn't in here because it's upstairs. I typically, with a hardcover, if it's got one of these on there, I'll take it off while I'm reading it, just to make sure I don't beat that all up. But I'm here to talk about the first 5 chapters of our great Two Towers read-along that I am doing in conjunction with my partner in crime, Steve Donahue. We don't have the 3 hunters. Maybe we're Merry and Pippin. Maybe, But we're going along through. Split it into 4 different parts in the Two Towers. So for this first week, we read chapters 1 through 5. Then we'll read the next 6 chapters for this next week. And then we'll read the first 5 chapters of Book 4, which will go and follow Frodo and Sam. And then we'll conclude the month with the last 5 chapters of Book 4. And that will take us to the end of the Two Towers. And if you haven't seen them yet, go check out Steve's videos. I will link to his videos down below. He's done a video per chapter. Plus he did one to kind of lead into everything. So he has gone whole hog on this. He is so excited to be doing this. And I am very excited to do this too. I wish I had the time and capacity to make a video per chapter. And it's just absolutely delightful to listen to and to hear his discussions. And I wouldn't miss a single one of them. I hope he continues to do a video per chapter because it's just absolutely delightful, and I'm sure you'll agree. So definitely go check those out. I'm not going to do that. I will do kind of a quick lead-in as to what we're dealing with. So this is Third Age Middle-earth. Third Age is... So Tolkien split the history of Middle-earth into 3 ages. And you can kind of think of those as kind of epochs, eras with the creatures inhabiting Middle-earth. Men, dwarves, elves, hobbits, what have you. And through each of those, there are sweeping narratives. Events that happen, struggles with elves and godlike beings that have incredible power, and the forging of the rings of power, the eventual downfall, the betrayal of men by Sauron, and then the eventual culmination, which we see at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings films, where Isildur cuts the ring off of Sauron. That marks the end of the Second Age. And so from that point on, we are in the Third Age. So it begins with Sauron defeated. Everybody thinks forever, except for a few wise ones that know better than that. And his power is greatly diminished. But we learn pretty quickly from Tolkien that so long as the One Ring, the Ring of Power, Sauron's great ring, as long as that exists, Sauron will always have some dwindling modicum of power in Middle-earth. And as long as he has that, he can eventually regain form. And we see in The Hobbit that he comes back in the form of the Necromancer, who is doing some mischievous stuff. Not quite where Smaug is with the Lonely Mountain, but in the near vicinity. And then the council ends up having to go and deal with that threat. And he's driven out of there and into his stronghold of Mordor. And years pass. Gandalf ponders over this ring. Doesn't know it's the One Ring for quite some time. But begins to suspect based on how Bilbo ages. And it delves him deeper into the lore. He realizes what it is, tests it with Frodo. Because Bilbo passed the ring along to his nephew. And so Frodo is the one that is inheriting it, because Bilbo didn't have any children, so he leaves Frodo everything that was his, Bag End and all of that, goes off and lives with the elves, retraces his adventures, and ends up in Rivendell at the end. And for many, 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 many years, we have a lot of not happening in the Fellowship 3. It's about 100 pages of being in Hobbiton and the local vicinity before they finally leave the area. Which is why I had originally suspected that this would be a great idea to jump straight ahead to the Two Towers, because I can admit, as much as I love every bit of it, it can be a bit of a slog to get through those first 100 pages, because there's not really a whole lot happening. But it's a lot of wonderful character development and growth and lore and richness that is just seeped all throughout Tolkien's works, and you see that everywhere. And I suspected that the Two Towers would be starting with a bang. And these first 5 chapters, so they pick up, if you've seen the movies, then you'll have an idea of what's happened along the way. We pick up after the splitting of the Fellowship. Frodo and Sam depart down the river in the boat. Boromir is pierced by many, many orc arrows and dies defending Merry and Pippin, who end up getting picked up by the orcs and whisked away back towards Isengard. And then we have Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn, who are trying to figure out what all happened to all of their friends now that the threat of the orcs have left. Gandalf has fallen in Moria, so he had left them long before this point. And they're trying to figure out what conspired. They come across Boromir. Aragorn comes across Boromir and his final breath, and he's able to pass along some of what happened, and Aragorn is able to get the greater gist of where Boromir failed, but also where he succeeded, that he did not give in ultimately, that he was able to not only come back from his temptation by the ring, but to valiantly stand against all odds to protect those 2 defenseless hobbits. In the end, it was for naught. But that does not negate the heroism of that deed. And Aragorn tells him rightly so, that you succeeded. You were a great man, and you did well. And Boromir passes, and Aragorn does not tell Legolas or Gimli about his potential stealing of the ring, his attempts to try and take it from Frodo. But Aragorn, we're told, suspects that is what prompted Frodo to leave and Sam to depart with him once they figured that out, that's what happened. And so they're left with the conundrum of, do we follow Sam and Frodo? Do we go and try to rescue Merry and Pippin? But first we have to do something with Boromir, because we can't just leave him out in the open. They don't have time to dig a grave. There's no stones readily at hand to build a cairn. So those would take a lot of work, so they decide to push him down the river in a boat and give him a proper send-off for a warrior. And they ponder the idea of what they should do, and ultimately Aragorn decides that they should follow Merry and Pippin rather than Frodo and Sam, because leaving those 2 to torture, to violence, to whatever fate is in store for them, is something that he feels strongly that he could not do. So while a big part of him wants to go and fulfill his commitment as one of the Fellowship and go with Frodo, he makes the choice to go and try to save who he can save. That's all that happens in chapter 1. And it sets the trend for what happens in the next 4 chapters. Chapter 2, we see the 3 hunters trekking across the country trying to follow the trail of the orcs. And, we get suspicions of things. We get hints that there's some power working against them that's speeding up the orcs and slowing them down. But they still do an incredible feat of going, I can't remember the exact number, but many leagues in 3 days. A feat that an ordinary trio of people would have a very, very tough time to do. And that chapter kind of culminates with them coming across the riders of Rohan and being told that their friends, if they were there with the orcs, are probably dead. They didn't see anything other than orcs. That they killed everything, nothing got away. And Aragorn decides, we're still going to go and check the site ourselves. It's still probably another half a day to get to where there's this giant mound of bodies that was lit aflame by the Rohan folk. But they're still going to go, and they eventually convince Eomer to lend them some of the spare horses. And so they ride off on 2 horses. And that's all that happens in chapter 2. And then chapter 3 goes to Merry and Pippin. And we get a recount of their time as captives with the orcs and the clever ways in which they maneuver. In chapter 2, Aragorn comes across one of the leaves that was part of the cloak and some fresh set of prints along the way. And it helps convince them that they're at least on the right trail and that one of them at least is alive and has some wits about them, which gives them hope and reassurance. And we get to see how that plays out. And we get to witness what happens when the riders of Rohan surround the orcs and the conflict within the factions of the orcs, that there's 2 at play here. We can discern that one faction belongs to Sauron and the other to Sauron, and they're at odds with each other. One wants to go take him to the Nazgul that's waiting. The other has strict orders to take him unspoiled to Sauron in the tower. And obviously, only one of them can win. And so the inner turmoil gives them opportunities to loose some bonds. And when the time comes, they are able to sneak away through some good fortune in greed of an orc, and playing off of him and his greed for the ring, and the orc's desire to perhaps get the reward for himself. They sneak off after eating some lembas, because they're hobbits. They must sit down to eat. I mean, battle raging on around them, but they have time to eat. And that's what happens in chapter 3. And in chapter 4, they meet Treebeard, who is an Ent, the Ent, the oldest. We learn in chapter 5. The Ent that the Fangorn Forest is named after. Like he is representative of Fangor. He's not the only Ent. He's not even really necessarily the head Ent, but he is the oldest, perhaps the wisest, and the one that is directly responsible for what's going to happen in chapter 4, which is a lot of talking with Treebeard the Hobbits, which is all delightful. Treebeard, I love his character, his speech, his approach, the necessity of telling the hobbits repeatedly, don't be hasty. The trying to place them in where they belong in the song, him believing that they were originally orcs. I mean, all of these are wonderful. They eventually get to an Ents-moot is called, gathering of the Ents to discuss the problem of Isengard with Sauron, who has been despoiling trees for far too long and building up an army of evil orcs on their doorstep, and something must be done now, and these hobbits are stirring it up. And we have a long delay in there where it takes them merely the time to say good morning and to recount who these hobbits are and agree, they aren't orcs, and to agree that okay, we should add this line that the hobbits suggested to the Song of People and Things. And the hobbits aren't very happy about that. But they're given a chaperone of Quickbeam, who is another fun little character that we'll meet a little bit more along the way. And they're let off to go and just spend time with Quickbeam while Ents Moot continues. And that's how it happens in chapter 4. And then we get to chapter 5, where we have the White Rider with Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. So we go back to the three hunters. And they eventually kind of puzzle out an idea of what happened there at the scene of the battle. And realize that their friends, at least one of them, got away and went into Fangorn Forest. And they're terrified to do so because they've been warned against it. So they go into the forest and they encounter a spot where there's 2 sets of hobbit tracks. So they are reassured by that. But they also encounter a strange figure, a wizard. I think it flashes the white as he approaches. They think it's Saruman, and they want to strike him down. Legolas, shoot him with your bow, and Legolas hesitates and can't do it. Aragorn, he was right not to do that. Until we know that he is truly dangerous and a threat to us, striking him down while he's defenseless would be no merit. And we get the reveal after a little bit of suspense that it is in fact Gandalf, and we get a recounting of what has happened to Merry and Pippin and their relief at hearing that, and a little bit of a recounting of what happened to Gandalf when he grappled with the Balrog, and a discovery that, okay, while they're in where they need to be, the time has come for you to ride with me to Edoras to go see Theoden King of the Rohirrim. And that's where chapter 5 ends. And not a lot's happening. And it's all good. There is slow burn. All of these things building up to magnificent crescendos that are going to be paying off before the end of part 3 in this book. But if we skipped 100 pages of Hobbits to come to 80 pages of aftermath of Boromir. It's still good. It's still so good. I'm enjoying every minute of it. Steve Donahue's enjoying every minute of it. If you are reading along with us, I'd love to hear about it. Whether this is your first time, as long as you've seen the movies, there's no harm done to jump straight into the Two Towers. Or whether it's your first time in a long time getting back to the books, there's some value to jumping in straight in the Two Towers. It provides a very interesting approach, and it's helped me see things through new eyes. And Steve Donahue's videos, of course, have also helped tremendously with that, and they've been wonderful. And yeah, I hope you'll join me, and as we dive into the next half of Book 3 and get to see what plays out with Helm's Deep and the breaking of Isengard. At the very least, we have those to look forward to, right? We got 6 chapters. At least 2 of those are going to have action in them, right? Right? So it'll be good. And I hope you have a great day, BookTube.